Yesterday I watched Chasing Amy, and I feel pretty conflicted on what to feel after watching it. It ultimately fell pretty short for me, and I can easily pinpoint the exact moment it happened. It was something of a plot twist that causes the film to lose a lot of punch and direction in where it was headed, and honestly, it's fairly disappointing. So to start off, this isn't really a review, but I'll cover some of my criticisms real quick. Like most Kevin Smith movies, there are a ton of references to nerd culture, which I think would have been more appealing back in the day, but honestly, in a post-Big Bang Theory and nerd culture basically being big business in Hollywood now world, I find this sort of thing kind of annoying, and especially in this film, it feels kind of overdone. I can't comment on how it would have felt in 1997, as I was a little over a year away from being born. It also wasn't the most impressively shot film. The camera felt like it got framed, dropped on a tripod, and they recorded. That said, the sets and lighting are pretty good. Anyhow, on to what I actually want to talk about, and where I think this movie really fails for me personally. To boil it down, this film is something of an unconventional love triangle between Holden McNeil, played by Ben Affleck, Alyssa Jones, played by Joey Lauren Adams, and Banky Edwards, played by Jason Lee. Basically, Holden and Banky are making a comic together that is fairly successful when Holden is introduced to another comic creator, Alyssa, who he really wants to date, but as it turns out, she's a lesbian. Anyhow, their friendship starts to develop, and Holden is learning to essentially be more understanding towards homosexuals, who he doesn't really understand at first. However, Holden is in love with Alyssa and decides to profess it to her, which leads to Alyssa angrily storming off. At this point, I assumed the film would be an unconventional love story about these two people that are ostensibly opposites, an adventurous lesbian woman and a more homebound man who doesn't understand her plight. This was a plot I thought was going to be pretty mature and interesting. However, after a few seconds, Alyssa runs back and embraces Holden and they fall in love. And from here, I feel the movie absolutely falls flat. When we are introduced to Alyssa, we pretty quickly find out she's a lesbian.
This girl is gay. Any interest in a story like that?
Which seems to be pretty centered to her character within the film, which is essentially billed as an unconventional love story. When she starts dating Holden, she explains that she wants to date him since he's the first man she ever truly connected with. The issue is Ben Affleck didn't really do much to woo her in this film, except to ask her tone-deaf questions, arguing the semantics of whether or not she's still a virgin since lesbian sex doesn't involve penetration with a male sex organ.
Virginity is lost through penetration.
Physical penetration or emotional?
Emotional penetration,
Well, I fell in love hard with Caitlin Bree when we were in high school.
physical penetration.
Arguing that women can lose her virginity through rape.
So if a virgin is raped, then she's still a virgin.
No, of course not.
This scene could be fine and have a purpose in the film if it was a springboard for Alyssa and Holden's friendship, and Holden actually learned to look at the world from a more broad perspective. However, since they got together such a short time later, and at no point does Holden really learn that his beliefs are narrow-minded, the film essentially just awkwardly runs with it, and I guess this was a clumsy comedy scene, I think. There's also this idea presented by Banky that women can't really be lesbians and feminine, and that you're either, as he puts it,
The man-hating dyke.
Good. Why?
I don't know.
Because the other three are figments of your fucking imagination!
or that the woman just needs a deep dicking.
All every woman really wants, be it mother, senator, nun, is some serious deep dicking.
This is later reaffirmed by the fact that Alyssa, a fairly feminine character, essentially quits being a lesbian for Holden.
Well, can I at least tell people all you needed was some serious deep dicking?
Point is, the film really feels like it's setting up some ahead of its time themes, which might have actually panned out to be something really interesting. And it felt like Holden was going to learn a broader perspective of the world, and it be an untraditional love story about two friends from different worlds deeply connecting, but not necessarily sexually. But then at the moment they kiss in the rain, the true themes start trickling in. And those themes are effectively that sexual encounters of the past, and that past sexual promiscuity doesn't matter, but that comes with a fairly awkward cost. Later in the film, there's a point where Holden finds out Alyssa isn't really a virgin in his terms, which means she had sex with a man previously. Specifically, 2 men at once, which bothers Holden quite a bit, so he beats around the bush about it with Alyssa, and she essentially said she didn't know who she was sexually, and that she had sex with women, and at times, when she was young, multiple men, presenting the idea that because she had parents who weren't around often, she didn't have a good heterosexual relationship model. This kind of bothered me because we were introduced to this character as being a proud lesbian, and at this point it feels as though that factor of her character was dismissed as essentially being sexual experimentation, and that all she needed was a loving, slightly homophobic man to snap her out of being gay, more or less. Honestly, I think that is what conflicts me so much. The setup for the film sets up a pretty unique love story, less about romance and more about two people helping each other find themselves and gain a broader horizon of the world and other groups of people. But it ends up being a movie that basically boils down being a lesbian to either a fetish or because you hate men. And I think this film sets up something much smarter than that. Also, one more thing I absolutely hate is the scene when Kevin Smith, as his Silent Bob persona, explains the themes of the movie, which end up being that people's sexual past should remain in the past, and that otherwise you won't have a good relationship. And while he explains what we already picked up on, he also name drops the title like 15 times, which seems really on the nose.
So I spent every day since then chasing Amy.
Holden makes a biographical comic of his relationship at the end of the film, which he presented to Alyssa after they break up, and the title is Chasing Amy, which I think would have been a more satisfying way to explain the title of the film than having the director show up 3/4 of the way through the film to spoon feed us the title. Overall, though, I actually liked a lot of the performances, and I think there's the bones of something really solid here. I just see the last half of the film as essentially being a huge waste of potential, as I genuinely think this film had all the tools to be a truly great film.